5:15 is the time. We're going to have a Temple football update after this interview. Some news about the coaching search for the next Temple football coach. Actually, a good time to announce this right now. In the break, I actually got confirmation that Matt Rule, who is now the coach of Baylor, the former Temple coach, will actually join us tomorrow at 4:15 on the Zach Gelb Show. But now let's talk some more New York football Giants. Been the big topic of conversation today because Big Blue had a big victory last night, 10-7, defeated the Cowboys twice. Only 2 losses this year for the Cowboys. Both come at the hands of the New York football Giants. And now joining us on the hotline, someone that does a great job covering the Giants from Metro New York, and that's Kristian Dyer, who joins us right now. Kristian, Zach Gelb here. Appreciate a few minutes for Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. Welcome to the show, and how are you?
You know, everyone now, Zach, is going to be Googling Temple football for the next 10 minutes of my interview. I'm not going to listen to a word I'm going to say. Hopefully it's Kurt Shiraka, the former Rutgers offensive coordinator. Strong Temple ties, currently off at Western Michigan. I mean, the guy would be a great fit returning back to the program. I think he would be a home run hire for Temple if they went that direction.
You know, it's funny you say that because I didn't know he was actually a Temple graduate until actually a few days ago, and I saw that name, and I said, I'd actually be interested by that. I'll tell you this, it's not going to be Phil Snow, the defensive coordinator, and I knew that a few days ago. I told people, expect him to probably join Matt Rule at Baylor. We'll see if he does follow Matt Rule to Baylor, but a report just came out by Mark Narducci that it will not be Phil Snow. Let's talk some Giants, though, and I do like that little Temple football nugget that you do bring to the show because I am a Temple alumni. But with this Giants secondary, I've been high on this unit for the past few weeks. It starts with Jenkins and Landon Collins, but they got a really good effort last night from everyone, and that could be the best secondary in football, Kristian.
Yeah, the way that they're playing right now, really stepping up with the absence of Jason Pierre-Paul. I mean, Pierre-Paul going down a week removed from his 4-sack, 1 interception, pick-6 performance against the Cleveland Browns. The Giants' pass rush looked completely different without Pierre-Paul in it a week ago at Pittsburgh. But it was almost the opposite case here on Sunday night against the Dallas Cowboys. The secondary was locked down. I mean, Rogers Cromartie playing maybe his best game of the season. They're lined up so often in the slot. Janoris Jenkins was huge, obviously forcing that fumble late in the game to ice things. But the Giants secondary, I don't know how many times you could talk about the quarterback hits or the sacks that were coming in, but really they were coverage sacks. And the amount of hits that Dax Prescott took with that tremendous offensive line in front of them, this unit's starting to gel. And it was kind of the Landon Collins show very early on in the season for the Giants. I think a legitimate argument can be made that he should be in the MVP discussions, somewhere in the discussions there. But by all means, last night for the Giants secondary, a tremendous showing. And with the offense sputtering like it did, they needed someone to step up. And on Sunday night, it was their back end.
With Landon Collins, and I'm not saying he had a bad year last year. Everyone looks at that game versus New England where he dropped the potential Brady interception, had the ball in his hands, but he's done a complete 180, and he looks like a totally different player. Like you said, a potential MVP candidate, should definitely be in the discussion for Defensive Player of the Year. There's no doubt about that. And he may be the preeminent safety in the league. What's the biggest difference from last year to this year?
Yeah, talk about Landon Collins, Zach. I mean, this was a guy at the middle point of the season, led the Giants in sacks, tackles, and interceptions. Only player in the NFL to do that. And just the impact that he's had, his ability to wrap up players. We knew that last year, but certainly the concentration factor. He spent an awful lot of time this offseason really focusing on his hands and making sure that he was able to get a good beat on the ball and being able to haul it in. And we saw it last night, his flexibility, his comfort playing in space. And that's the biggest thing for a lot of players, safeties coming in, being drafted. Sometimes at the college level, they have a tendency to creep up so close to the line. They're so involved with the amount of teams that play a power spread or a version of the spread offense or the wing or the triple option that they're called upon in the run defense much more than they are at the NFL level. And the transition that Collins made playing in space last year was a little bit of a challenge for him, but we've seen this year just his absolute comfort level that he has, his ability to read, to break, and I think he's finally trusting his instincts. Last year, he was solid for the Giants. I think a second-round pick stepping up, playing the number of snaps that he did, top 3 on the team, I believe the most snaps of any secondary player for the Giants last year, just kind of building on that, just really taking that next step. And to think this guy's heading into year 3 next year, how good could he be at the back of that Giants defense for years to come?
Very scary. And going into the game, a lot of people had concerns how this defense would look without JPP. Romeo Okwara was just excellent last night. He was really brilliant in that football game, the kid coming out of Notre Dame. And also, Devin Kennard also had a good game. So how about those two players and what you saw to them last night?
Yeah, Kennard adds an awful lot there at the linebacking position. I mean, he's a guy who has great read instincts, really just always goes with his gut, just like we talked about with Landon Collins a few moments ago. Thought he stepped up, had tremendous length that he also brings there when needing to drop back into coverage. Works well as a little bit of a foil with Casillas, who's that thumper back there. Robinson, Kennard, all those guys are going to be covering an awful lot of space and an awful lot of turf, something that we haven't seen from the Giants in years past when their linebacking core has been a bit slow. And then Okwara, this was a guy who I'm not sure if he did anything all game long other than just come in off the edge. It looked like that was going to be his assignment. Use his length, kind of get after the quarterback, and just be that designated pass rusher. And, the fact that we're talking about him today, an undrafted rookie free agent out of Notre Dame, no, there's an awful lot of attention on him, but how about those big, ugly guys in the middle there, Zach, that did a good job? Hankins, Damon Harrison, really just being tremendous there, getting a good push, taking on 2 blockers and occupying, to me, what's a top 3 offensive line in the NFL. So an awful lot of credit goes to those guys. And Olivier Vernon, who had a very good game, a little bit under the radar, didn't put up the big numbers.
He was everywhere.
But he was everywhere. He did an awful lot, and people don't talk about it. But this guy drops into coverage when need be, and that's a big part of this scheme as well.
Just a very good team effort on defense, and you had a ton of players just piling up statistics on the stat sheet, and you're dead on about Snacks Harrison. I think he only had 4 or 5 tackles last night, one of them being for a loss, but the push that he got in the trenches all night was definitely a big reason why the Giants won the game. As Kristian Dyer joins us right now, covers the Giants for Metro New York. So it's ironic because all in the offseason we thought, what's this defense going to look like? You think the offense would be pretty darn good with Eli and the bevy of options he has around him. It's been the complete antithesis. Stellar defense and an offense that, quite frankly, is not consistent and not that impressive. Can the Giants get this offense going, Kristian?
Yeah, a lot of self-inflicted wounds on Sunday night. The 2 fumbles from Eli Manning, the interception, I'm not sure what he was choosing to do. I know that was an athletic play, but throwing into coverage, the wide receiver was bodied up. But there are some issues down the field as well. I think Victor Cruz having the past couple weeks some real issues in terms of his separation. This was a guy who early in the season was doing a good job. I think teams kind of figured it out. Looks like he's, maybe just not quite that same burst that we saw the first 4 or 5 weeks from Victor Cruz when we were all proclaiming that he was back. And the offense, so much of it's being funneled through Odell Beckham. And Beckham, I think, to his credit, had a fairly decent game last night. We're going to talk about the drops. We're going to talk about some of the other things off the field, always with Odell Beckham. But this is a guy who, if he's not in it, the Giants have a zero-dimensional offense, quite frankly, Zach. It's their inability to run the ball effectively, play in, play out. They might get that 7 yards, 1 snap, but then the next snap it's going to be -2 followed by, a 0 net run. So just not being unable to consistently run the football is killing them. The offensive line, again, had its struggles last night. Eric Flowers, to me,
brutal.
Is looking, he's not looking like, a day 2 pick even at this point.
Right.
And I think an awful lot of blame. We want to credit Jerry Reese, the general manager, for a 9-4 record in a team that seems poised to return to the playoffs for the first time since 2011. But if this team doesn't win a wild card game, the blame's going to fall on Jerry Reese because of the offensive line. And the Giants could be, running away with the wild card right now if they had an effective offensive line. They don't have an answer at left tackle. They don't seem to have answers in the interior at one of the guard positions. If Weston Richburg goes down, all of a sudden you're looking at a really bad offensive line.
Would it behoove them to sit Flowers down? I know they don't have much behind him. You cover the team a lot more than I do and around there each and every day. could you see someone maybe filling in there at left tackle and giving this team a little bit more better effort than Flowers? Because what I'm seeing out of Flowers right now, it's just pathetic.
Yeah, it's terrible. He's trying to rely on his athleticism. You would have thought after the year one he had, where he was probably the lowest graded first-round player coming out of that 2015 NFL draft, that there would have been some off-season improvements. But it just seems like on the technical side, this guy's relying on his physical traits. And everyone was telling me that, he's ready. He's going to be taking the next step. He's had a great off-season, and you just watched it in training camp. You watched it in preseason. He hasn't taken that step forward. And when he regresses, he goes back to just pure athleticism, and you can't do that at this point in the NFL. And the Giants struck out on some awfully big tackles. Russell Okung was a possibility. I know Eugene Monroe comes with a fair amount of baggage, but the Giants insisted that this guy was a left tackle. How different could their season be? Could they be a double-digit win team at this point, Zach, if they went out there and actually took care of the situation, put Eric Flowers on the right side, and had a legitimate starter on the blind side? I think Eli Manning would look a lot better. I think it would solve an awful lot of the ground game issues as well.
It's very funny that we started this interview talking about Temple. I know an offensive tackle that Mel Kiper actually ranked the best offensive tackle, senior offensive tackle in the country, and that's Deion Dawkins of Temple. I would be surprised,
Tremendous player.
Yeah, really good player. I would be really surprised, though, Kristian, if when we get you back on to talk a little draft, that the Giants aren't drafted an offensive lineman, because it's such a position of need, as you know.
And then you look at the performance of, let's say, Eli Apple last night, one tackle, did some good things out there, but certainly very much of a learning curve for Eli Apple in his first year in the NFL. I think Eli Apple's going to end up being a very good player at the NFL. I think he's going to be a starter. I think he's going to be someone who's going to be in some Pro Bowl discussions. But did he fit the need? And to me, the Giants sitting there at number 10, I know that 3 or 4 offensive tackles were already off the board, but do you try to move back? Do you try to address that situation? Do you try to maybe just bring on board somebody else, trading back in the draft? And to me, Eli Apple was a luxury pick, maybe didn't necessarily fit what they needed at that point. But clearly, I think their intention was to go offensive line in the first round. I think they're going to have to at some point. They got to do a better job than they did with Eric Flowers. If that means trading up and moving some assets to get a top 5 pick, top 10 pick next year, to address that situation on the offensive line, they got to do it, Zach.
Kristian Dyer with us right now. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up these two players, because we all talk offense, we all talk defense. How about special teams? Because Dwayne Harris and Brad Wing last night, 2 really big punts that were down inside the 5, Kristian.
Yeah, hashtag wing for Pro Bowl. I mean, this is a guy who's been tremendous. We talk about the 5 kicks inside the 20, but the length, the distance that he's getting, the hang time as well. This has been a guy who, in the early parts of the year when the Giants were 2-3, I think he was probably their best player, and he kept them in some games because he was able to change field position. And punter's a tough one. I mean, you kind of feel like, he's not really a part of the team. You don't want to invest too much necessarily in a high-end punter, but the Giants need to go out there and make sure that Wing is a part of their team long-term, because he's a very special punter, not just a directional guy, but gets great distance as well. So, I think that's kind of going to be one of the unsung things the Giants have to address this offseason, is make sure that Wing long-term is in their fold.
And anyone that chastises you for that hashtag, all I'll say, especially if you're a Giant fan, is just remember the last time that team won a Super Bowl, Steve Weatherford in that Super Bowl against the Pats, and I saw him just kick football after football perfectly in that game, and I'm a Patriot fan, so that's a little sore spot for me, but
without a doubt.
He did a great job.
And when you look at the fact that Wing is also the holder as well, he's now gone through a couple different kickers. Robbie Gould, the latest one, by having Brown originally. We know what happened with Brown. It's the very sad story with his family and domestic violence abuse. That's an untold part of this season, is how Wing has been able to go out there and be effective as a holder as well, and it's kind of been seamless in that regard. So, yeah, Brad Wing, to me, is an automatic for the Pro Bowl. We'll see if others agree.
Kristian, 3 games left. Last night, pretty much to me, says the Giants are going to go to the playoffs. You just probably have to win one more game. Yeah, sure, you don't want to go 1-2 to finish up the season. You have the Lions, then you're in Philly, and then you're in Washington. How many more games the Giants win this year in the regular season?
Well, certainly you're looking at an Eagles team that right now, I mean, really they were a dangerous team early on, but I think we all remember what Bart Scott said. There's a bit of fool's gold on this team at the quarterback situation. I think we're seeing that Carson Wentz, awful lot of potential, awful lot of promise,
Just
certainly
no talent
justifying.
around him.
Yeah, it is the talent around him that's hurting him right now. But so many good pieces in place for the Eagles, just not enough. It's always a difficult game for the Giants, but that's a winnable game. Certainly Washington's in the mix of things right now. They're in a playoff position as things stand. And that Detroit game, I know people are talking about that comeback that they made yesterday, but Stafford's hurting right now. And with the Giants' pass rush, that's going to be a very interesting matchup to me. I think that was one that maybe Giants fans thought a week ago was a loss, coming off their own loss at the Steelers. But Stafford, the way that he's playing, the hand injury, everything else, that to me right there, I think the Giants might be able to take 2 of these final 3. If they do so, they're going to be a tough out. I don't think they're an NFC championship team, but they're going to be a team that no one's going to want to play in the playoffs, especially if they can start to get things clicking on the offensive side of the ball.
If they get that offense going, we had Kevin Burkhardt on earlier in the show, and he said he would not be surprised if the Giants were in the Super Bowl. They just got to get that offense going. If the season concluded yesterday, right now you would have the Giants in Atlanta wild card weekend. Would the Giants beat Atlanta right now?
I don't think so. I think Atlanta is just so good on both sides of the ball. You know, I mean, when you look at Atlanta, what they've done defensively, how they've improved, and that was supposed to be a real weak part of their team. To me, that's going to be a tough one just because of the way the Giants' offense is playing right now. I'm not sure they can go out there and beat Atlanta. Now, if they take some step forward, maybe they actually let Eli go out there and play and have time to throw the ball, I think that this could be a team that could win a game or 2 in the playoffs. But from what I saw last night offensively, I don't think the Giants, especially without a Jason Pierre-Paul coming off the edge, probably won't be back in time for at least the first playoff game. That's going to be a real tough matchup. I don't think they could keep up with Atlanta.
Kristian, before we let you run, this is a great spot by you today on the Zach Gelb Show. Kristian Dyer from Metro New York. Real quickly, tell the listening audience where they can follow you on Twitter and how they can read you.
Well, I'd rather they not follow me on Twitter because they'll just end up unfollowing me as soon as they realize I don't break any Temple football news.
Yeah.
But it's Kristian R. Dyer on Twitter. It's Kristian with a K, R. Dyer. And, work for Metro New York newspaper. There's also a Metro Philadelphia as well.
Perfect. Great stuff, Kristian. We'll have you on again real soon.
Thanks, Zach.